What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. So today we are going to do the exciting top 24 of 2024. For those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. My name is Jaya. I put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday in regards to all things bookish. I am a huge book lover. I love reading, especially fiction in particular, of all different types of genres. And this past year, I read 186 books. For those of you that are returning, I hope you've enjoyed the bookish content thus far. I am basically here to talk all things books, love all things books with all of you guys, and we're here to create a bookish community. I did want to start off with a disclaimer. I like to read my physical copies of books and I love collecting them. That being said, there are so many different ways to consume books, whether it be through the library, through Audible, through ebook, whatever it may be. And I honestly do consume them in all different formats. That being said, if bookish content is your vibe, then you're definitely in the right place. And without further ado, let's get into the video. So basically, these are going to be the top book selections for this past year. Books that I would definitely recommend, books that stayed with me after I finished them, or books that were just so good that they had to make it into the top tier ranking. Of the 186 books that I read last year, I didn't have too many that I didn't care for. I got very lucky with a lot of the reads that I did. And while I will say there were quite a few 3-star reads and base level 4-star, like that 3.75 to 4-star area, there were also quite a few decent books. There's very, very few books that I didn't like, so I'm not really going to do a video in regards to that because I do think I kind of cover the books that just weren't right for me in some of my other wrap-up videos. So if that's something you're also interested in seeing, definitely consider checking out some of the other videos in this channel, particularly all of the reading wrap-ups. That being said, first book on the list in no particular order is going to be Riley Sager, Lucy Score's Riley Sager series, the first book, The Dead Guy Next Door. Now, this book is about a character named Riley Thorne. She is a psychic who's trying to avoid the fact that she is psychic. She is also in really, really bad situation right now because she just got out of a terrible marriage with a egotistical, maniacal, insane human. And he basically blames her for a bunch of things and makes it so that she owes him money even though he was the one that cheated on her. Just to give you a background. So she's very, very broke. She's living with a bunch of octogenarians, and these guys are a hoot. They are very clearly in their 60s and older. They're so funny. It's such a crazy cast of characters. They do not give a crap about anything, pardon my language there, but legit they're gonna do whatever the heck they want because they're allowed to. They're old, they get away with it, and they're cute, so they're obsessed, and I love that for them. They're just so funny. Pardon me as I change out these frames. I was just feeling something a little bit different when I saw myself on camera with this top. But basically, the point being that it is a cahoot of characters. Enter in Nick, who is our male lead character. He is so funny. He is such a supportive male lead character. He's an private investigator who used to be a cop. He has long-standing drama with one of the characters in the police station, who also happens to be like a brother to him. So there's that ongoing dynamic that's going on. Riley's entire family is also insane, so you also get that dynamic. And recently her grandmother, who happens to be the best psychic, one of the best, runs the guild, if you will, decides to send her a coach on how to tap into her psychic powers. So she's living with octogenarians. She has a psychic mentor. And then we have a private investigator knocking on her door because it just so happens that the man who lives next to her, who is also scum of the earth, happens to die. And she may or may not have predicted that it's going to happen. And he takes us on a whirlwind of a journey. This book is absolutely hilarious. If that entertained you, let me tell you, you're gonna love this book. The slow burn romance is so well done. Lucy Score just has a way of writing books, and it's just so beautiful. This one I wouldn't say is her most poetic language, but this one is absolutely hilarious. This was definitely a 5-star read for me this year. I have not stopped thinking about this book since I've read it, and honestly, it's the book that made me want to read all the other Lucy Score books that are on my shelf, which I have now completed, and honestly have enjoyed all of her writing. So if you're looking for something that's fun, fast-paced, enjoyable, this girl's your book. We're going to put the books on the floor as I'm done talking about them because there are literally 24 books here. Next up, again, in no particular order, we have The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. This is the second book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. So basically, you have the Caraval series that Stephanie Garber wrote, which is set in this fantastical world of, you know, princesses and princes and ball gowns and circuses and like magic in general. And then from that series, you had a spin-off series that came out called the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, set in the same world, but it's about a character named Evangeline and her journey as she tries to solve a bunch of situations and unlock a riddle in order to successfully attain her goal. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm keeping it vague on purpose. You also have another main character in this series who I absolutely love. Jax is a fate. Jax is the fate of broken hearts. He, in my humble opinion, got a little bit of the short end of the stick in the Caraval series. So it was really nice to see him as the male lead in this series. This series is fantastical. It's magical. It's beautiful. Evangeline's character is very, very entertaining. It kind of takes the two characters from Caraval, the main female leads, who are Donatella and Scarlet, and combines their personalities into one. So you have a woman who's very strong, has good morals and ethics, but makes morally gray decisions sometimes. And she's basically just trying to figure out her life, and she wants to find love. She's always open to adventure and is up for the next best thing. And she ends up thawing the heart of our favorite villain to love, Prince Jax. Or I should just say Jax, the fate of broken hearts. This book in this particular series was my favorite. It is the second book in the series. The first book I think was great. It really sets the tone for the rest of the story. But as far as the romance and as far as the story and like the connection between the two characters, a little bit more of that dynamic of high stakes, all of that I felt like was really wrapped up into this book. The only reason why the third one didn't make it onto this, or the first one didn't make it onto this, again, the first one's a little bit slower because it's story building. And the third one, unfortunately, there's a character introduced that I really, really don't like. So it was hard to stomach her role in the book, which is why I didn't quite put those on the top 24 of 2024. But I will say The Ballad of Never After was definitely one of my favorite reads of the year. Next up on our list, so swinging in a completely different direction, we have The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Now, here's a funny thing about this book. When I originally read this book, this was like a 2-star read for me. Why? Because you hate every single character in this book. But then the more I sat with it and the more I reflected on it, and after I talked about it with my book club, I realized what a phenomenal piece of art this book is. Donna Tartt is a mastermind in the way that she tells a story. It really, really, really allows a glimpse into the darker side of humanity and how easily you can get manipulated and pushed in a direction where, like Telltale Heart with Edgar Allan Poe, where your heart and your consciousness and your conscience, sorry, not your consciousness, your conscience can end up weighing on you so hard that you kind of devolve as a human being. This book is basically following a cast of characters who are going to school. They are in college, an elite program with a professor who's not always present. They're kind of seeking guidance, but they're also experiencing the joy of freedom that is often seen in many, many, many young adults as they enter into that college state of life. And when they are desperately in need of guidance, they don't have it. You have narcissistic characters in this. You have sociopathic characters in this. You have characters that are manipulative. You have characters that are like very, very difficult to fully and 100% support. There is murder, there is mayhem. This is the absolute definition of dark academia, in my humble opinion. Since We Were Villains, which is one of the best books I have ever read of all time, I would say The Secret History holds a close place to a second in my heart. She has done a phenomenal job with this book, and there is a reason why this book is talked about so much. So if you're into, books that really look into human psyche, that really, delve deep into that dark academia kind of vibe where like you have that camaraderie and that friendship, but also that subtle level of competition that's always there that can sometimes drive a person insane, the need for control, the lack of guidance, those types of things. This is your book. This is your book, ladies and gentlemen. There she is. I have really bad allergies right now. I sincerely apologize. I have actually taken allergy pills. I have been tested as well. I don't have COVID. It's just allergies. Good times. So you might see me sneeze like 500 times in this video. Moving on. Chef's kiss on this book. Chef's frickin' kiss. I am obsessed with this book. Like, let me tell you, Beartown is such a beautiful book. Frederick Bachman is probably one of my favorite authors of all time. I unfortunately have to take breaks between reading his books because they hit home so hard. He's a mastermind of writing simplistic sentences, easy language that just suck you into a novel. He'll help you experience every single emotion that every character is experiencing. He has a way of storytelling where atmosphere is not an issue for him. He can create atmosphere seamlessly, and every single one of his books will leave your heart ripped out of your chest, bleeding on the floor, and you will thank him for it. That is how he writes. He's a phenomenal writer, and he really hits on hard social ideas. The first book by Frederick Bachman that I ever read was Anxious People. And by far, that was one of the best books I've ever read. I think I have made everyone and my mother read this book at this point. It was so, so good. Really, really, really hones in on day-to-day life and like relationships between partners, the struggles that all humans face, and how at the base of everything, one decision does not necessarily define you. It's a beautifully written book. This book is similar. This touches on some pretty traumatic topics. So just so you know, this will talk about rape. This will talk about mob mentality. This will talk about neglect. It will talk about different kinds of parenting styles, all that good stuff. And it is a work of art. This book is basically about a hockey town because they rally around the high school hockey team. On the hockey team, there is a star player who truly, at the end of the day, is just any other boy who just wants to, have his dreams and be loved, but he puts himself in a horrible situation and hurts someone in the book. The difficult thing about this book is I felt like I could relate to every single character in this book and I could understand them. There are certain points where I love characters, there's certain points where I hate them, and there's certain points where I can truly feel their remorse and their regret. Beartown was a beautiful book. It made me sob like a baby, and I think it was one of the best experiences I ever had. I started this book and finished the book in the same day. I will be completing the series hopefully this month, so stay tuned if you want to hear more about Us Against You and the Winners book, which are the last two books in this particular series of Beartown. But Frederick Bachman, strongly recommend. Beartown, excellent book, but it is very emotional. It's a beautifully written book, but it is very emotional. And I would just warn you guys about that. But worth the read. Worth every single word of the read. Next up, coming back in a different direction, here we have a classic romance novel, contemporary romance, I should say, Anna Huang, Twisted Love. This book is the first book in a series of 4. You can see the rest of the 3 books there on my shelf. While those 3 books were also enjoyable, there was something unique about Twisted Love that I just absolutely fell in love with. It was one of my first Anna Huang books ever. Actually, I think it was the first Anna Huang book that I've ever read, and I adored it. I adored this book. I think both the characters are so fun. At the baseline, it's a sunshine grumpy relationship novel, but there's so much more depth to the character. Alex Volkov, I think is his last name. Yes, Volkov is basically billionaire rich. He's basically one step below being CEO of a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar company. He and his uncle work together. His parents, unfortunately, were murdered when he was a young child. And you're basically going through this journey with him as he kind of figures out what happened in his past, as well as allows himself to care for someone else. He just happens to have to take care of his best friend's younger sister. So one of those kind of one of those kind of novels. Then we have Ava Chen. Ava Chen is a very, very happy character. She's very cheerful. She's fun. She definitely has that young college energy, but she also has some trauma in her past. She's lost her mom. There's a lot of things that have happened where she doesn't quite feel like she fits in at home. And the beauty of this book is just the way that the story is woven together. The places at which you get bits and pieces of the history, you see the two characters growing, is just beautiful. I also love their relationship. The way he loves her, the way she loves him, is just really beautiful to see as the book progresses. It is very spicy, so for those who don't want spice, don't pick up this book. This is like a solid 3.5 to 4 chili out of 5 for me. It was a lot of that, but it's done well. The other thing that I will say is that this book, I think, really speaks to growing, like as an individual, facing your fears, growing up, you know, understanding that even if things don't go exactly the way that you want them to, there's like end game vibes in this book. And I think that's what I really loved about this book. So I would recommend to everyone who wants to pick up an Anna Huang book, who wants a classic sunshine grumpy romance with a little bit more high stakes involved, this is your book. Oh, this book. You're going to be a cozy bug cuddled up in a rug with this book. This book is sunshine in a book. This book is joy in a book. This book is syrup in a book. This book by Ashley Poston was one of my favorites of this year because it makes you really appreciate the value of family and love, and it allows us to see that no matter where you are in time, there are certain relationships that define you and follow you throughout life. It talks a lot about hard things that happen in the book too, but it's beautifully written. So our main female protagonist is basically a young woman who has inherited her aunt's apartment. She's really struggling with the fact that her aunt is no longer there. She was her person, and her person is now gone. So as she moves into this apartment, she also remembers a little thing that her aunt had told her, which is that sometimes when you walk into the apartment, it takes you 7 years into the past. This book is hilarious. The romance in this book is so beautifully written, and I adore this book. She's basically trying to figure out her life. She's trying to figure out her career. She's trying to figure out her next move. She's trying to grieve. She's trying to move on. And our main male lead just makes that transition so easy for her without putting too much pressure on her. And he himself, you also see him grow between the course of the book as well. Would strongly recommend, absolutely love The 7-Year Slip. This book. I think I talked way too much about this book by Lyssa Kay Adams. This is the Bromance Book Club. This book is a little bit of a twist on our classic, contemporary romance. It's still a main male lead. It's still a main female lead. Both characters do grow throughout the story, but you're kind of fast forwarded in time in this book. So this book starts off with a couple that's been together forever. They have, beautiful children that they're trying to raise together, but the wife feels like the husband just doesn't get it, and the husband's really struggling with trying to express his actual feelings to his wife as well. They are on the brink of divorce. This man also happens to be a professional athlete, so he's constantly put in high stress situations, but he's also a man's man. He's a guy's guy. He doesn't know how to express how he feels to his wife. Meanwhile, his wife has had trauma in the past where she really struggles with believing that someone is there for the long haul, for the run, and that, love is a real thing. So she needs that constant reminder as well. Enter the Bromance Book Club. The Bromance Book Club is a bunch of high-profile, athletic, or manly, men-defined jobs that get together in order to read romance novels to better understand how to approach these difficult situations to win the loves of their lives. This book is adorable. It's so cute. I have all 5 books in the series. I have loved all 5 books of the series. I rave about these books all the time, but the Bromance Book Club is a special hit for me. I adore this book, and I would not be surprised if I end up picking it up again this year in February in order to reread it and see where my standings are this year. But every time I pick up this book, I just feel a moment of joy, because I just feel like it's so beautiful to see a man's perspective on the relationship, as well as his journey with opening up with his friends, kind of like that locker room talk, while still being open to understanding how to talk to women. The inner dialogue is great. You also get little excerpts from the novel that they're reading together, which is absolutely hilarious. Overall, great book, would recommend. I'm going to try to go a little bit faster because I realize it's already been 20 minutes since we started this and we have barely made a dent in the pile. So here we go. Next up, thriller. So we have the Mind F series by St. Abby. This book is phenomenal. It is a collection of short novellas of 5 books. It is about a serial killer who is a female. So already a lot more fun there. She's small, she's tiny, she has a little bit of chub on her. She knows exactly how to make herself look so she doesn't look threatening at all. She's out for revenge on a town that truly took away her life and her childhood, and she's out to get blood because she wants to honor her brother. That being said, you also have a main male lead character who happens to be one of the best FBI profilers of all time. So if you're looking for something fun, a little bit high stakes, a little bit entertaining, and a little bit stabby, Stabby Abby got you. Great book. All right, next up. So, Magnolia Parks. A lot of people talk about Magnolia Parks. The first 3 books of Magnolia Parks are now complete, and that series has been wrapped up. But along with Magnolia Parks, you also got Daisy Hates. Magnolia Park basically is a series that has been set in London. It is about the elite of London. These are extremely rich people who are constantly on the news. They are like the equivalent of the royalty of Britain. Everyone's watching every single one of their moves. They're constantly in the limelight, and they're basically navigating their young romantic lives. It is beautifully written. Jessa Hastings just has a way with words that's absolutely beautiful. A lot of people really love the Magnolia Parks series. Now, the thing for me is I found it really hard to like Magnolia Parks herself. So being that I wasn't a huge fan of the main female lead character, but I loved all of the I would say all of the secondary characters in that series, I wanted to continue reading. Enter Daisy Hates. This book, this series, this part of the series, I'm obsessed with. Daisy Hates is a gangster romance. Basically, this young woman wants to be a doctor in order to save lives. She just happens to be the younger sister of one of the most brilliant, most talked about, most notorious gang leaders as her brother of all time. They primarily focus on art in terms of thieving arts, as well as staying out of certain things. That's the rule of thumb between Daisy and her brother Julian. You get perspectives from Daisy in this, you get perspectives from Julian in this, and you also get perspectives from Christian, who is the main love interest for Daisy in this series. Now, the thing that I love about these books and the things I love about Jessa Hastings is like the way she writes the book. You just absolutely fall in love with every single one of the characters and the way they think. If you're looking for morally sound characters, these are not your series. If you're looking for, humans that make mistakes and also morally gray characters, but like this idea of found family, regardless of where you come from, this is it. This is not a realistic book, okay? I'm not saying go find yourself a gangster in order to fall in love. That's not what I'm saying at all. But this book is beautifully written. And Daisy Hates' character in particular, I really enjoyed. I loved how feisty she is. I love how strong she is as a woman. I love the fact that she's really trying to hold on to her heart despite of all the things that have happened to her, all the things she's grown up with. And love this book. Love this book. Next up, another fantasy. So, Assistant to the Villain, I did not think I was going to like this book, but this book by Hannah Nicole is just phenomenal. It's so cute. It's about a grumpy man who happens to be the villain terrorizing the entire community. And this young woman who's just trying to find a job in order to support her family happens to stumble upon him when he's mortally injured. He then takes a liking to her and offers her a job. And so she ends up working for him in order to bring coin home to support her family, where her father is basically a cripple and unable to go to work, and her sister is basically leaning upon her in order to succeed. She has gone out of her way to give up so many things in her life in order to be a good daughter and a good sibling, and now she almost had marriage thrust upon her, and she's found a way to stay away from it thus far. Evie is such a beautiful soul, such a beautiful character that keeps getting put in dark situations where she has to make some decisions that are a little bit hard for her. But the best part of the book is the slow burn romance going on between the villain and Evie, our main female lead character. Both characters are so beautifully written. The storyline is so beautiful. The fantasy is so easy to fall into, so easy to read. This book is heartwarming. It's hilarious and it's heartwarming, and that's all I have to say about it. Can you tell how hard I'm cheesing? Like, all these books bring so much joy to me. Next up, I'm going to pull up all 3 books because they're all from the same series. Oh my God. Okay, so I decided to jump into the world of Solaria this year, and I decided to finish all 23 books of the completed series in the Solaria world, including the Zodiac Academy series. The Ruthless Boys of the Zodiac were not my favorite. The Zodiac Academy was absolutely wonderful. There were some books that were hits and misses, but overall the series was absolutely incredible. And Darkmoor Penitentiary I enjoyed quite a bit. But in particular, looking at all of those books put together, my favorite books of all time were probably these 3. Now, in no particular order, I guess actually in publication order, Cursed Fates is absolutely beautiful because this book is where you get a lot of your juicy romance, and like, I mean real romance. Like, you go from this bully romance where you hate all the main male lead characters. I mean, you hate them. I was ready to throw this book out of the window. That book was a 2-star read for me. I was so angry with that book. I cried, and then all my friends who have read it were like, no, power through, Jaya. You got this. So I powered through. And let me tell you, when you get to this book, your heart melts a little bit. It melts a little bit for both of the characters. You really get to see the relationships growing between the male and the female leads in this series. You also get to see friendships that are like truly bound together. It's just such a beautiful book, and it is a thick book. This is over 1,000 pages long. How many pages are you? Oh no, just shy. Sorry, 918 pages in this. This is a great, fun, fast-paced read. Finish this in a day. Then we had book number 7, Heartless Sky. So in Cursed Fates, you kind of see all the couples coming together. You see their relationships really flourish. And then in Heartless Sky, you see them ripped apart, and you see how the characters have to survive that. This is an emotionally overwhelming book, but it's so beautifully written, and I would strongly recommend this one as well within the series. It just happens to be some of my favorites, if you will. Then outside of that, we had Beyond the Veil. This is actually a novella accompanying the series. It is to be read right after book 8. They're happening simultaneously. Beyond the Veil, I think, was way more enjoyable than book 8. Book 8 is very long, and it wasn't my favorite. It's a lot emotionally. It did have periods where it was really slow, and I didn't really care for a lot of the things that were happening to the characters in that book. But this one was really fun because you have a whole new cast of characters, and these are characters that have been referenced throughout the entirety of the series. So just to give you an idea, at this point you have finished 8 books in Zodiac Academy itself, plus 3 of the novellas, plus Ruthless Boys. So you are hardcore down the rabbit hole by the time you get to this book. But these characters have been discussed in other books and other plot points. So when you finally get to this one, you really get to see the viewpoints from characters that have never really had a chance to voice their opinions before. And you see the events happening from a different perspective. I do think you have to finish book 8 before you can read this in order to understand certain pieces of the timeline that the characters in this are referring to. But as far as companion novels go, this was one of my absolute favorites, hands down, and I enjoyed every second of this book. One stack down. We're going to go to the next stack. Getting back into thrillers. We have First Live Wins. This book, guys. Okay, Ashley Elston is an amazing storyteller. This is about a woman who basically, you get a little bit of a flashback to her past as well as her current future, or current present, sorry, not future. She is in a relationship with a man and it sounds like they're doing great. She's just met his friends for the first time. They're trying to figure out where they want their relationship to go. Enter her past. She's actually a con artist. Beautifully written book. She is planted in this relationship by another man who happens to be her quote-unquote boss, and she is supposed to infiltrate his life and pass information to her boss that he can then use as needed in discretion for any kind of power moves that he wants to play. In the midst of all of this, she finds out that she's also being hunted and potentially targeted for termination because she knows a little too much. She also made a slip up in her last job, which makes her a concern for her boss. Meanwhile, she's actively falling in love with her Mark. Sound familiar? If you guys like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is your book for you. This is a great book. Look at all the tabs. I had so much fun tabbing this book. There was just so much going on that in order to keep track of everything, I had to tab everything. And this was also our book of the month for that month that this came out. This came out back in January of last year. So absolutely adored this book and would recommend. Next up, I have another book that I had to annotate with one of my other favorite authors, Alex Michaelides. This is another thriller. It's so beautifully written. The language and the prose in this is really nice. The thing I like about Alex Michaelides' thrillers is they're a little bit different because there's a psychological component to it. There's quite a bit of psychological thriller that's going on in these books. The characters, as they're being developed, you get a lot into their psyche so that you can better understand why they're motivated to do the things that they do. And by the time you get to the end of the book, you've just been on such a ride and it's so worth every second. So this book is great. This book is about a cast of characters who go to an island together in order to celebrate the success of a particular woman who happens to be a famous actress with her crew of family and friends. There's a lot of craziness that's happening behind the scenes. You have adultery being discussed. You have, unrequited love. You have, the son who's just like trying to be the prodigal son but is put in difficult situations. The main female lead herself is an actress, so she has quite a bit going on in her background and her life and her history. And our narrator is one of those narrators who's not always the most reliable. If you're not a fan of an unreliable narrator, maybe don't read this book, but I do think the way that it's written is absolutely beautiful and I personally would recommend it. This book is taking place in Greece. Another thing that I love about this book, because my honeymoon was in Greece, so I have a soft spot for that. But overall, in my humble opinion, The Fury was excellent, and I'm very much looking forward to any new books that Alex Michaelides may be releasing. Another stabby romance. We have Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. This book has kind of taken the internet by sensation. It's basically about two serial killers that fall in love. They're serial killers that only hunt other serial killers, and they are the way they are because of tragedies that have happened in their past. You get a little bit of their background, a little bit of their story. You have a little bit of cat and mouse going on. You have other, loose ends that need to be wrapped up. And then you have a budding romance between two characters that have absolutely no emotional breadth at all, that are so traumatized and so effed up, if you will, that they literally stab people to death. But they find a way to let each other in and have a romance bud. It's so cute. It's so funny. It's so hilarious. It is gory. It does have a lot of sex. There is a certain part of this book where it's like 4 chapters of just spice. I'm pretty sure when I reviewed this book in the original reading wrap-up that this book was in, I listed the chapters where the spice scenes were. So if you're not a spice person, you can just skip those chapters. But I will say it's pretty vanilla for being a serial killer romance. Now, what I will say about this book that I did love is that these characters are really easy to fall in love with, and I truly enjoyed it. I also really loved the second one in the series, and I'm very much looking forward to the third one. That should be releasing soon. So we're going to keep our hearts and minds and prayers open that the third book is going to be released on Book of the Month because I want the matching set. But yeah, I'm very, very excited for Scythe and Sparrow as well, which will be coming out later this year. The second book in the series is Lark and Leather, or Leather and Lark, and that one is also absolutely amazing. So Bryn Weaver just did a great job of doing a serial killer romance. That's all I can say. Next up, I have Phantasma. Phantasma is my first foray into Kaylee Smith's writing, and I absolutely adored it. This is a paranormal romance. It is about a young woman who is basically entering into a competition in order to secure wealth, to be able to hold on to her family home, to secure safety for herself and her younger sister. She chases her younger sister, who is a little bit more impulsive, into the game Phantasma and knows that the winner has a chance of getting one wish rewarded. In the middle of all of this, she also ends up having a romance with a ghost, and it is just beautifully written. It is set in New Orleans. The woman herself is a little bit of a witch. She has the ability to talk to the dead. Not quite necromancy, but she has the ability to communicate with the dead. Her mother just died and the powers have been passed on to her. I would say the first few chapters of this book are very slow, but overall the story is great. I mean, this is also a pretty chunky book. I think it's almost 500 pages, and I did actually finish this book in one setting. I could not stop thinking about it or talking about it. I convinced quite a few of my friends to read it at this point too, and all I can say is if you decide to pick it up, you are in for a beautiful ride. I absolutely adored this book. This is very much a fantasy, though, that is also based on trials and tribulations and those type of things, like competition vibes. So if that's not your type of fantasy, don't necessarily pick this book up, but I do think overall it is a brilliant book. Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I felt like she wrote this book for me. This is a book about a woman who's a little bit older, who's also very established. She's always done the right thing as expected by her family. She's going through a breakup that is absolutely horrible, where they had actually moved in together and they have a house together, and she has to figure out what she wants to do. She is part of Manhattan's elite. She's one of the best doctors that is known. Her father and mother are very well established in the medical field as well, and they literally hold banquets and things like that, and they are known to be absolutely brilliant at their job. And she's just kind of trying to figure out what actually makes her happy, and how she does want to be chief of medicine and she does want to make a difference in people's lives, but she wants to do it in her own way without her parents kind of saying what she has to do. And she's also trying to escape from this reality of always having to be quote unquote perfect. Our main male lead comes from small town vibes. He is definitely bigger with hands-on work. He's like in construction and things like that. He has basically taken over property that his grandparents have left him and turned it into an inn, and he lives nearby to the main house, and he basically wants to keep that legacy alive. He falls in love with this beautiful woman, and he is just trying to figure out the next steps in his life. It is also an age difference romance where she is older than him, so keep that in mind. But I did love the fact that the male lead character in this did appear to have quite a bit of maturity, and it was just so fun to see these two characters get together and the way that they thrive. I felt like this book was being written for my heart. It was like a balm on my heart, and I do think it's going to make you cry, it's going to make you feel, it's going to make you laugh, but worth every moment. And yeah, love this book. Next up, I have another thriller. This one is The Lies I Tell by Julie Clark. I thought this book was absolutely hilarious. This is about a con artist woman basically trying to successfully take down the men that have caused problems for her in life. And then we have a reporter who's also trying to chase down the story and figure out who this woman is. At some point, you do see a friendship budding between the two women, and it's just so funny to see the cat and mouse that's happening. Beautifully written book. That's all I'm going to say about it, because I think anything more gives away the plot line, and this was probably a very surprising top choice of mine. Book of the Month did a wonderful job of selecting this book, and I can see why they did. This is actually released in June of 2022, so it's been sitting on my bookshelf for quite some time, but I'm really glad I picked it up. It was probably one of the best books that I read, and I read it very early on in the year, and I still remember vividly what happened in this book, and I still recommend it to everybody. So would definitely recommend this book if you're looking for a fun, fast-paced, again, more psychological type thriller. I think I have a type of thriller that I like, guys, but it was great. Next up, we have a contemporary fiction. This is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. It was a very interesting idea. This is one of those books where you don't necessarily like your protagonist character. She's actually more of an antagonist, and you're kind of going along this journey with her. Essentially, what happens is this is a woman who is an author who feels she deserves to be recognized for her work. She feels like her writing is very beautiful and very strong. She just hasn't found the right person to represent her, and her last few books haven't done too well. She's also friends with an Asian woman who happens to also be an author and is absolutely a phenomenal writer. She's celebrated, she's making millions, and people are waiting with bated breath for her new manuscript to be turned into a book. The two of them are hanging out at this rich writer's apartment when she chokes and dies. So our main female lead then decides that she's going to take over the manuscript that is uncompleted and unpublished by this woman that just passed away, edit a few things here or there, change her name, and basically sell the book as her own. As you can imagine, there's a lot of morally gray components to this storyline already, and we're basically going through this journey of what happens when she decides to publish this book as her own in order to see herself, make a name for herself in the reading circle. The end of this book was a little weird for me, but overall I think it was a great book. So if you guys are looking for something fun, fast-paced, cynical, entertaining, morally gray character, something that's going to you want to sink your teeth into, something you want to actually hear what happens, but you're not necessarily going to love all of the characters in this book, this is your book. Next up, so another series that I read this year was books 1 through 3 of the Red Rising series by Pierce Brosnan. Pierce Brown, not Brosnan. Wow, what am I saying? We're not thinking movies right now. We're not thinking James Bond. I'm so sorry. But Pierce Brown wrote an amazing sci-fi series called Red Rising. I don't read sci-fi very often. I don't know why. I actually do tend to enjoy sci-fis that I read. I think it's just that maybe it's the amount of fantasy components to sci-fi that are so far-fetched from reality that, I don't know, because that's not even true, because romantasy is also far-fetched reality, but I don't know what it is. I usually don't read as many sci-fis as I probably should. That being said, Red Rising series was absolutely phenomenal. It was a 5-star series for sure. The first book is beautifully written. It is very Hunger Games vibes as well. There's trials that are happening in that book. You get introduced to the entire world that we're working our way through. So it's really like our main character, Darrow, is growing through the ranks. And it's very much like a coming of novel. So it's very well written, it's very enjoyable, but it for me was a little bit slow, and I'm not a huge fan of trials and tribulations. Like, it has to be done the right way. There are certain books where I love it, certain books that I don't. And I think with the Red Rising book, like, it was very, very good. It was still like a solid 4.5 stars for me. It just wasn't my favorite. Enter Golden Sun. Golden Sun actually takes place after Darrow has kind of proven himself. He is a red, which basically means he's the lowest tier of humans that are currently in the world, and golds are the best. So basically you have tier system rankings of all of these different colors of different like creatures, people that live, and based on their color they have a hierarchy. Reds are lowest on that hierarchy. Darrow ends up being turned into a gold from being a red, and his goal is to infiltrate the system, break it down systematically, intrinsically, and rebuild a system where there's more equality between all the characters. The only thing is, this book in particular was a lot more fun for me because Darrow has to deal with the fact that he has now been with the golds for so long that he has created some real friendships within the golds as well. So from going from being a red who has been treated like shite basically his entire existence, and having buried his head in the sand, he loses his loved ones. He like ends up going through these trials and tribulations. He has so much anger when he decides to take on this project, and now that he's actually a gold and he's seen as a gold and he has made relationships with the gold, it's all about his moral compass and like how he deals with the difficulties of the situations that he's thrown into, trying to navigate the various political situations and things like that in this book. And I think I just loved that about this book. There was a lot of character development. It was really enjoyable. So Golden Sun for me was my absolute favorite. Red Rising, again, more building up of the world as well as the main character, getting to understand him, the journey that he's been through. The third book, Morning Star, is more political, like it's where everything kind of comes to head. But Golden Sun, I think, is where you get most of the character development and the character relationships. And that's what I absolutely love about this book. It is very high stakes. It's very, like, you know, keeps you on the edge of your seat. And it's just such a beautifully written book. Next up, another Lucy score, Things That We Never Got Over. This is small town romance. You have a main female lead who is happy. You have a grumpy main lead. There are some high stakes in this book. It's very, very well written. I'm not going to talk too much about this book because I did a whole series review on the Things We Never Got Over, or the Knock 'Em Out series. If you are interested in seeing more of my thoughts, please do consider checking out that video. Otherwise, take my word for it. Lucy Score just has a beautiful way of writing. I think any book of hers that you pick up, if you realize that you like the writing style, I think you are going to enjoy a lot of her books. I think for me personally, I have read quite a few of her books at this point, and I would definitely say that the Riley Thorne series as well as the Knock 'Em Out series thus far have been my absolute favorite of the Lucy Score books that I've read. Next up, one of my all-time favorite authors, Miss Emily Henry, knocked it out of the park again with Funny Story. This book is hilarious. This book is heartwarming. This book is heart-wrenching. You will feel every range of human emotion through the course of this book. Our main female lead and main male lead in this book are just, oh, they're such characters. You just love them. The book starts off with a friendship out of necessity and convenience and turns into a romance. This is like a love square, okay? Our main female lead was engaged to a man who ends up falling for our main male lead's girlfriend, where they used to be friends. So they've now gotten together and these two have been kicked to the curb. She has nowhere to go. He needs a roommate in order to be able to pay rent. Ergo, they end up together. They literally start off their relationship by bawling over the fact that they've been dumped by these two assholes. And then they slowly build up their own confidence, their sense of self, their relationship throughout the course of that. Miles is such a puppy dog. I absolutely love him. And then Daphne? I want to say her name is Daphne. Yes, Daphne is just, so ridiculously easy to relate to. This book was phenomenal. Probably one of my all-time favorites by Emily Henry. Book Lovers is still probably my favorite of all the Emily Henry books that she's written, but this is probably a close second. I think I like this more than all of the other books combined, except for Book Lovers. Book Lovers will always hold a piece of my heart and soul, but Emily Henry struck again. Sorry, I can speak English with Funny Story. And that brings us to our final book of the top 24 of 2024, and that would be Kingdom of Ash. This is how I started my year. This is great. This is almost 1,000 pages, 998 pages or something like that. This is the conclusive saga to the Throne of Glass series. Throne of Glass is an 8-book series. You go through a whirlwind of emotions through that series. And the beauty of Sarah J. Maas's writing is, like, she will take something she wrote about in the very first book and somehow tie it all together by the time you get to book 8. So things that you have completely forgotten about will get roped back in, and you're just like, oh my God, okay, I see the relevance of that now. But this book is amazing. 900 and something odd pages. Finished it in a day. Loved this book. Such an amazing culmination. I don't know if I would ever sit and read the entire Throne of Glass series again, but I could totally see myself just sitting down and reading The Kingdom of Ash again, because the way the story pulled together and tied together at the end was phenomenal. Throne of Glass is basically a series following one primarily main female lead character named Selena Sardothian. She is an assassin for hire, and she is the best at her job. In the beginning of Throne of Glass, she has been in prison for years. She is ready to throw her life away because of the things that have happened to her, which Assassin's Blade, which is the prequel to the series, will cover. So you can read this in whatever order you choose. Some people choose to read Throne of Glass, then Assassin's Blade, then Crown of Midnight. Others will read Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, then Assassin's Blade. Others, like myself, read Assassin's Blade first. Assassin's Blade, again, is the prequel to everything, but a lot of the things that get tied in from Assassin's Blade don't start happening until depending on the series order that you read it in, the 3rd or 4th book in the series, which is Heir of Fire. Heir of Fire onwards in this series basically feels like you're reading a completely different series. Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight feel very young adult. The other books in this series do not feel as young adult. There's no spice, I would say, in the first 3 to 4 books, depending on, again, the order that you're reading them in. And then there's a lot of spice following that. But what I will say is that it's just such a well done series. Our male leads are Kale and Dorian, oh my god, I love Dorian, and the partner that he ends up with. But the story basically starts with you seeing these characters as children and you watch them grow. So you basically get very, very attached to these characters as you progress throughout the book, and just seeing all of them, the heartbreak, the gut-wrenching situations they go through, the amount of betrayal, distrust, like anger that's brewed, the amount of healing that happens in this book, the culmination of that entire series, including the political turmoil that's happened. It's so high stakes once you get to that part of the series. Like, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Would also recommend that if you do decide to sit down and read Throne of Glass as a series, that you definitely consider reading it as a tandem read for books 6 and 7. I definitely think Empire of Storm and Tower of Dawn should be read together as a tandem read because they're happening simultaneously, and it just makes it that much more tolerable to read Tower of Dawn. Tower of Dawn is also a wonderful book. It's very, very well written, but it is one of the slower books in the series, whereas Empire of Storms moves very, very fast. So a lot of these names probably sound very confusing because I didn't actually talk much about the series, but basically, again, Throne of Glass is an 8-book series, and this is the final book in the series, and this is what I started my year with, and I can honestly say I do not regret starting the series, culminating my year by starting this book and finishing this book because it was beautiful, and I do see myself rereading it at some point in time. Basically, what I'm trying to say is read Throne of Glass. Read Throne of Glass, great series, wonderful, absolutely read it. And that, my friends, brings us to the conclusion of this video. I realize this was a ridiculously long one, so if you made it this far, thank you for being here. For those of you that enjoyed this, definitely let me know what your top 24 books were, or just what your top books were. Tell me what you liked, what you didn't like. Tell me what you want to see read on this channel, any series that you feel like I need to dig my teeth into or my claws into. I'm always open to the suggestions. But that being said, those were my top 24 of 2024. Wishing you guys a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful 2025. And I will most likely be putting a video out with my anticipated book releases for 2025. There are so many. I've already realized there's about 25 to 26 books that are coming out in 2025 that I'm so excited to start reading because these are much anticipated novels for myself. Number 1 being Onyx Storm, which is releasing at the end of this month. So that being said, I will catch you guys in the next video. For all of you watchers who are here today, thank you so much for being here and joining me. If this is your type of content, please do considering hitting that subscribe button. I put out videos every Wednesday and Sunday. For those of you that are returning, thank you again for your support, your kind words, everything. It's been such a joy and such an honor and privilege to be able to build this bookish community with you where we can talk about like-minded interests, which in this case is books. Love you guys. Until next time.